This is the Living Vertizontal podcast, brought to you by The Church at Riverstone, a fellowship of the Church of the Nazarene in Madera, California. We are a podcast that discusses the intersection of Scripture and our lives. Together, we continue the conversation that was started each preceding Sunday morning in our worship gathering.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick.
And I'm Natasha.
And we are the Living Vertizontal podcast with you this week to continue this journey that we are going through in this season of Lent together. Last week, we began this journey through Lent, a season of reflection, a season where we come face to face with our own mortality, a season inviting us to realize our full dependence on Jesus. As we kicked off our Lenten journey, we worked through Psalm 95 together. And as we worked through this psalm, we talked about Jesus' invitation to trust his plan and provision in the midst of the journey, in the midst of our own wilderness experiences, if you will. Together, we identified that when we are in the wilderness, we can choose to either harden our hearts and strive to see ourselves through, or we can recognize our need for dependence on God alone and find rest in the midst of that wilderness time. Though it's not always easy to recognize, Jesus is present in our journey every step of the way, even in our own wilderness experiences. As we continue our Lenten journey in this second week together, we are going to be looking at Psalm 84, and I'm going to be reading for us today. So here is Psalm 84 for us. How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty! My soul yearns, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young, a place near your altar, Lord Almighty, my King and my God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength, till each appears before God in Zion. Hear my prayer, Lord God Almighty. Listen to me, God of Jacob. Look on your shield, O God. Look with favor on your anointed one. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold from those whose walk is blameless. Lord Almighty, blessed is the one who trusts in you. So this is our psalm for today, for this second week of the Lenten season. Before we get into a conversation on the passage as a whole, I wonder if there's just some things that might be good for us to identify as we go into it.
So right off the start, it's always good to kind of, especially with Psalms, I feel like it's helpful to know what's behind
where it's coming from.
What's the heart of the writer of it, the people who are singing it, kind of what's their context. And so I think it might be worthwhile for us to begin there and just touch briefly on that. So Psalm 84 is a psalm that's attributed to the sons of Korah. And the sons of Korah would have been Levites. And so these were among those who would have been in charge of music or worship in the temple.
So people that are already at the temple.
Yes.
Okay.
So you could think of them as like the modern day worship leaders, for example. So it is their job to bring people into this place of worship. And so all of these people that they know are pilgrimaging, which we should talk about that in just a second, but they are aware that all these people are pilgrimaging in to the Lord's temple to participate in a whole bunch of religious festivals.
Sure.
And so this is kind of gets at the heart of that journey, that travel. It uses that for imagery in the spiritual life. And so that's kind of the thrust from the writer's perspective of why write this, where are they coming from?
So a song to sing as we go along.
Yes, exactly. And so then also there's this other piece that's going on that would be important for us to be aware of. And that is that Psalm 84 comes from a time when the temple in Jerusalem is the central place of worship. You cannot just worship Jesus in your living room or worship God in your living room, right? So like they don't even have access to the Messiah yet, right? So God's presence, right, really is equated with temple. And so God's presence is only in existence in the temple. And so because of that, Jewish males were expected to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, to the temple, for major feasts. So these would have included things like Passover, Pentecost, the Festival of Tabernacles. So these various Jewish celebrations. And so this pilgrimage was oftentimes long, oftentimes treacherous. And you hear mention of some of these kinds of wilderness places by the psalmist in here. And so as you're reading, you can kind of get this picture of all of these people traveling a great distance with great anticipation to participate in these festivals of worship and praise. And the anticipation and excitement that comes from that sort of a journey of going to something that's big, that's great, that's exciting. And so you kind of put that mindset on, I guess, as we go into and discuss this passage. With the kids, we talked about things that they're excited about. And one of the things that came up, a lot of them mentioned things like, we'll go into a particular theme park. You know, they have a family vacation planned. And so they're so excited and looking forward to that. And even the drive down there is just so exciting because they can't wait to be there. Similarly, the buildup for Christmas is such a big deal.
I mean, that one gets me.
So this is kind of that anticipation that you want to hold in your mind as we're looking through this psalm today.
Yeah, and I would add to this something that we talked about on Sunday morning as well, was this idea that Lent, the season of Lent, is an invitation to journey, right? We talked about that last week on the podcast. We talked about it on Sunday last week and this week. And in that sense, for these next 40 days, while we're maybe not taking a physical journey like what they're talking about in this psalm or what's being alluded to in this psalm, we are on this spiritual journey where we are inviting Jesus to search us. We are kind of working through our lives and saying, okay, in what ways do I need to grow in dependence? What are things that I need to set aside that I've become too dependent on that are not you? And so in a way, over these next 40 days, we're on our own journey.
Yes.
And so this psalm, even though we don't sing it because we are physically traveling from point A to point B, this psalm can be a song that we do sing. That is, it kind of a song of our heart, a prayer of our heart, because we too are on a journey.
Yes.
A little bit different, but a journey nonetheless.
Yes. And so this psalm is structured into kind of three main parts. So as we go through it, we'll look at it keeping these parts also in mind. So the first is verses 1-4, and this kind of articulates the longing for God's presence. So that excitement and anticipation that we've been talking about just here. And then to your point, Nick, verses 5-8 are going to focus on the pilgrim's journey. Which isn't always beautiful, right? It's not always glamorous. And so the pilgrim's journey is tucked there in the middle. And then it concludes with verses 9-12, which identify God as protector and a belief or a trust in him as protector. So this dependence conversation that you're also pointing to as well.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think that's actually going to be really helpful as we work through it. Just kind of keeping in mind, if we reference one verse or whatever, kind of what is going on around that, right? So we always talk about how context beyond our passage is important. Well, context within our passage is also equally important. So with that, let's kind of jump in and let's see where we go. For us on Sunday morning, for me, as I come to this passage, it's very early on. It's in the first verse, but I immediately was taken by the word dwelling. How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. And I was taken with that word because I was like, dwelling, that's not something that I guess it's not a word that we commonly use a lot today. We might say house or the place where you live. But as I begin to think about like what is a dwelling place, it's the place where there is a sense of permanence associated with it. It's the place where I live. It's the place where I find comfort. It's the place where I find security. It's the place where I can really kind of be myself. I can let my hair down. I don't have to like all of these kind of things that we think about when we come home. We don't have to be crazy dressed up. We can have like I have house clothes that I wear around the house where I'm really comfortable in them. Like there's just all of this kind of, I don't know, comfort and good feelings that I get when I think about my home. And the psalmist immediately talks about how lovely is your dwelling place, just this place where God is home, where God is permanent. And I guess as I think about that, like there's maybe a couple layers that I think about it on. One, in the psalm, right? As you brought up in kind of the intro into this conversation, like in this period of time, God's presence was experienced here at the temple. And so it was a very big deal for them to identify this is the place where God is. And I can only imagine like their yearning and their desire to be there because God's kind of a big deal for them. They can trace through their history God's deliverance, God's provision, and God's presence. And for them to have a particular place where they can go to experience that presence, I can only imagine just how important that was for them and how big of a deal that was for them. That God, the God who delivered, the God who provided, is still the God who dwells and is with them. And the second layer then is obviously we live on this side of the cross. We live on this side of the promise, the covenant to that he will always be here. He will never leave us or forsake us. And his presence is no longer contained within a specific building. It is the word that is used in the New Testament regularly is that his spirit is tabernacled within us. And so when we identify how lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty, now for us, like we are his dwelling and he is permanently here. There is nowhere, we talked about this last week, and I've talked about it a number of times on the podcast recently, but the psalm of, where can I go to flee from your presence, oh God? There's nowhere that I can go, no hole too deep, no mountain too high. And just for me, the fact that God is present and it has permanence to his presence within me, with us, it's pretty incredible.
I think it's something really that's easy for us to take for granted when we look at the context of they had to travel such a long journey, such a long distance to be in the presence of God, and the yearning and excitement that I have for, Christmas, like, right. That's the excitement that they had to be in the presence of God. And we get this daily. We get this moment by moment. And so I think that can be so easy to take for granted.
Yeah. And this is actually a conversation that we did have around our table on Sunday morning. This last Sunday was like how easy it is to take things for granted when they are always there. And I think about a perfect example in my own life is when we went to college in San Diego at Point Loma, right? Our university was literally right on the ocean. And I remember freshman year, first showing up, looking out over the water. We had like a sunrise service of some sort where we like put sand in a fish tank. I don't know. Anyways, that was kind of cool. But I remember thinking at that sunrise service, because we were in the Greek amphitheater and it overlooks the ocean. I remember thinking, I will never be able to get used to this. This is incredible. How lucky are we to get to have like this be the place that we're going to be going to school for the next 4 years. I had that thought on like day one freshman year, And then I remember parked just above the Greek amphitheater senior year, sitting in the car with you, looking at a sunset, thinking to myself, I can't believe I have taken this for granted for 4 years. We're getting ready to graduate, and I got so used to the fact that the ocean is right here, that these sunsets happened every night, that I actually did not cherish those moments. I took them for granted because I was like, oh, well, I'm on my way to something. I'll see a sunset tomorrow. And I just pushed it aside. And I feel like because of the reality of God's presence with us 24/7, not necessarily in a temple, but in within us, right? God's Spirit with us and within us, it becomes just like the ocean, so easy to take for granted because we say, well, I'm kind of, I'm doing this now. I've got to get this accomplished. His Spirit's going to continue to be there. I'll talk to him later. And it's just, it's beautiful that we have the access that we have to God. However, it's tragic. I feel like the attitude, the posture, and the way that we so often take his permanence with us for granted. And as I kind of think about that further and carry it further, I feel like there's a great danger. And I don't think God intended his permanent presence with us everywhere to be a danger. But I think that us in our humanity, there is a danger to the permanence of things in our lives because of the complacency that we so often allow to breed when we take things for granted. And the only kind of way around that, in essence, the only way we keep from taking those sunsets in San Diego for granted, the only way that we keep from taking God's presence moment by moment for granted is by having a sense of intentionality towards it, right? It's about that time for a sunset. I'm going to make sure I'm going to take a pause for a second. I'm going to watch this sunset. God, you're with me. I'm not exactly sure what to do here. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to pause in the midst of this conversation that I'm having with somebody, and I want to hear what you have to say.
I feel like Hal Perkins has been a huge mentor in our lives,
Yes.
instrumental. And one of the things that he has repeatedly said is that he needs disciplines and rules because he's weak. And one of the disciplines and rules that he has in place is morning by morning, he begins his time right when he opens his eyes with Jesus, acknowledging him for who he is. Yeah. Just starting initially, like recognizing the God of creation is here in my midst. Mm-hmm. And what could I do but to worship him? And he begins just by stating these phrases from scripture or from experience or from his knowledge of who God is, and just worshiping him for his attributes, for who he is. And I feel like that discipline, right, in his weakness, that discipline, that law that he has, it sets the trajectory well for everything that follows.
Right.
And if we have this risk in our humanity of complacency, and we know this, then maybe our rule doesn't look exactly like Hal's, because our lives look different and our patterns look different.
Yep.
But maybe we have to establish some rules, laws, or disciplines to intentionally interrupt our day so we can have moments of worship where we acknowledge that the God of the universe is present with us.
Right. To combat that complacency with intentionality.
Yes.
Yeah, and as we've been talking about this and this idea of complacency, another kind of story came to mind in thinking about how dangerous it can be to grow complacent in our journey with God, and the fact that he is always with us, right? That's where this whole conversation began. It can be dangerous. And a story that comes to mind to maybe illustrate this point is when it was probably maybe like 5 years ago. We went camping as a family. We took the girls camping. I think you were pregnant with Finnick, so maybe a little more than 5 years ago. But we went back to this place where Natasha, you and I, always used to camp growing up, and we're like, we want to show the kids everything. And so we were having fun. We're camping. It was super dirty and disgusting. Our girls looked filthy. And so we got to the end of the day and we're like, hey, it's time to go like rinse off. And there was this river that we would always go to.
Creek.
A creek. Yeah, you're right. It's not very big. A creek. I mean, it's a sizable creek though, maybe small river. Well, whatever. Semantics. But we were like, hey, it's time to rinse off so we can get ready to settle in for bed. So it was a place that we always used to go to when we would go camping. And so we were like, let's take the kids. So we took them to this creek. And while we're standing there, there's a whole bunch of rocks on like the side of the river. And we start throwing the rocks into the river. And there's nobody else around. There is so much water that they can throw their rocks into. And so specifically Rosie and Evie were kind of just going hog wild, throwing rocks, having fun, skipping rocks, trying their hand at it. And I was showing them, the specific rocks that they should be looking for to get the best skipping going. And so they were doing that. And all the while you, Natasha, you started bathing Scarlett, I think at this point, you were trying to rinse her off. And we had initially just said, hey, like make sure you stay over here when you're throwing rocks. And you were a little further upstream from where they were. And we were doing that on purpose because we're like, hey, we don't want anybody to get hit. But again, there was so much space for them to throw a rock. I mean, there's no way they're ever going to hit somebody where we were at. But then Evie, in her excitement to skip a rock and to find the right rock, is so focused down looking for the right rock, and then getting up and trying to throw it and skip it, and then finding the right rock again and throwing it and skipping it. She had worked her way back up river closer to where you were. And she found a great rock, and in her excitement, she goes to throw it, and she throws it, and she actually hits you in the face.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh no.
We recovered.
We're going to have to end our camping trip. I'm going to have to pack everything up on myself, go get some stitches. This is going to be fun. Fortunately, everything was fine. Way over imagined in my own mind. Thank you, Jesus, that everything worked out well. But I feel like that that story is a perfect illustration of the danger that's associated with complacency. Because God's presence is so prevalent and so permanent with us, we can become complacent, and in our complacence, we can cause damage. Evie, because of the abundance of space to throw a rock, never imagining she would find herself in a situation where her throwing of a rock would actually have physical repercussions, where she was hitting her mom in the face, she just kept throwing it, and she became complacent as she was throwing the rock. She wasn't paying attention anymore. She wasn't throwing with intentionality. I mean, her intentionality was to skip, but she wasn't trying to make sure she had a clear path to skip. And so in her complacency, she ends up hurting you. And in the same way, with the fact that we have this abundance of God's presence with us because he is always with us. He has this permanence, right? His dwelling place is with us, not just in some far off temple. Because it is with us, it's easy for us to become complacent. And in our complacency, it also becomes easy for us to cause damage. Because we still call ourselves Christians. The world still identifies us as Christian, but if we become complacent in the reality of his presence and we no longer operate in this way where we are intentionally saying, okay, Lord, what's the next thing I should be saying? What's the next thing I should be doing? All of a sudden we start saying and doing things out of our own understanding, out of our own ability, and we have a tendency to really mess things up. We can hurt people's feelings. We can hurt the image of Christ in the world today. Like, we can cause some serious damage in our complacency. And so I know we're only one verse in, and yet we're over 20 minutes into this conversation, but this is so important, this idea of how lovely is your dwelling place. I think Christians, we need to hear this song and we need to be reminded of just how lovely his dwelling place is, and the fact that his dwelling place is all around us and within us and among us. We must not get complacent, but we must be renewed in our joy and our excitement in our worship of him, so that we can have a proper orientation in this journey of life and live out of his overflow, out of his abundance, out of his strength, out of his leading.
Yeah, and I think the next verse, my soul yearns, even faints for the courts of the Lord. This is all about desire.
Yes.
And desire is kind of the antidote for complacency.
Yep.
When we desire God, authentically desire God and desire his presence and desire to see his activity in our life, when we authentically desire him, then there is no room for complacency. Complacency creeps in when our desire is for other things.
Yep.
When our desires start to get clouded and convoluted. And so really it's probably a good self-reflection for us to regularly evaluate, what do I desire most? When I'm excited and having a great time and joyful, what is it that I desire most in those moments? When things are hard and difficult, when I feel insecure, when I feel like my world's falling apart, what do I desire in those moments? Because if the answer isn't God, then we run the risk of falling into this trap of complacency.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And I even feel like the psalmist knows this. And so at the beginning, you had talked about how there's like three different pieces of this psalm. And the second piece is the journey conversation. And again, we're in this life, this journey, if you will. And when you look at verses 5-8, which is the journey part of this psalm, you see things said like, blessed are those whose strength is in you. So there's this dependence. There's this, I guess if I'm dependent, then that means I'm desiring that thing.
Well, the next line, whose heart is set on pilgrimage that, to him, temple. To his presence.
Yes. And this, as they pass through the valley of Baca, this desert place, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. This idea that wherever they go, whether it's dry or barren, because they go in the joy of seeking God's presence and the joy of his presence, in anticipation of his presence, wherever they go, whatever they touch brings life. No matter how dry a season, no matter how hard a season in their life or in someone else's, it's irrelevant because God is with them. Right. And this doesn't happen because of their own abilities, but it happens, verse 7, they go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. This journey is going to be a journey that is tiring, that is exhausting, that is emptying, and yet somehow these journeyers don't go from strength to weakness.
Strength to exhaustion.
They go from strength to strength.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because their strength is not in themselves, it's in you, it's in God.
And a desire that's so great that it compels them towards him in every moment.
Yeah, exactly. And, this desire conversation, as we push on you into like the third piece that this psalm is broken into, we have this verses 9-12 identifying, kind of summarized by identifying God as protector. But as you work through that and you look at it, there is this, in a way, I feel like there is this continued worship that kind of goes back to, God, this is who you are. How you brought up, how Hal starts his day in worship and answering the question that Jesus asked on his ministry, who do you say that I am? Like, responding to God. And these are the things that you are. The psalmist is talking about how God is the sun, God is the shield. He bestows favor and honor. He doesn't withhold any good thing. Like, these are all truths about God's character and God's action in the world. And out of God's character and out of God's action, the psalmist is brought to this place of worship. And when we properly orient ourselves in worship, recognizing who he is, that desire conversation falls into place. I mean, even here in this psalm, the psalmist says in verse 10, "Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked." This psalmist, who began the psalm in worship, in properly orienting himself to who God is and where he kind of fits in the conversation, when he did that, he set the desire straight. And then he clearly articulates that here in verse 10. His desire, he would rather be a servant in God's house than pursue status, comfort, or success, than material pursuits, than accolades of achievement, than anything. The psalmist in his worship is brought to the place of total dependence on God. And likewise for us, if this is who God is, how could we not desire him also? How could we not depend on him? His presence is always near. But do we truly want it? Or has it become an afterthought? Has complacency crept in? During Lent, we fast to remember that nothing sustains us more than God himself. So this week, may we let our worship awaken a deeper longing for his presence, the only one who truly satisfies.
As you journey with us through this Lenten season, we recommend purchasing A Consuming Fire, a Lenten devotional, which is available for purchase on Amazon. Also, be sure to follow the Living Vertizontal podcast to stay current on all our new releases. To learn more about the Church at Riverstone, visit us at thechurchatriverstone.org.